Every guy has their dream body or someone they want to look like. But here's the issue. That guy has a completely different skeleton than you. He has different clavicle width, hip width, length of his bones. And so the issue is your dream body might not be attainable. What you actually need to do instead is find your frame twin. What I want you guys to do is forget ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph, all that. That all sounds well and good, but it doesn't actually explain anything. You know, nothing like that is measurable, and it's not telling you really anything useful about your physique. Here's what actually determines your ceiling, okay? You can check all three in the mirror right now. Your clavicle width, and I recommend you get someone to measure you because it's going to be like pretty much impossible doing it by yourself. All right, so once you figure your measurements out, you want to see if you're narrow, average, and wide, and this is for a USA adult male. I know in India their measurements are a little bit shorter, so you want to keep that in mind when you're measuring. And then after you go find a bodybuilder and sort of matches your frame, you want to pay attention to these things on them. And if they're very close, then you kind of want to see how you sort of line up in comparison to them. Because I'll be honest, I remember being a teenager and I remember thinking, you know, I'm going to look like David Lade. And I learned he's on gear, has insane, you know, muscle insertions, right? You can kind of see here, like just insane fucking genetics and shit. And he has wide clavicles, you know, long limbs and all that. And I was 5'8" at the time. And, you know, I had shorter legs and arms in comparison. You can kind of see here the difference. Like he just has naturally longer limbs versus me. I have shorter arms and all that. It's important to know this stuff though, if you didn't already know this. Next thing is going to be the quad to hip line ratio. Okay, this is what I want you to do after this video. I want you to stand in front of your mirror, look at the outside edge of your hip bone, right? Kind of as seen here, right? In this example. And I want you to now make a straight line down from that point to the floor, right? An invisible line, or you can get like a ruler stick or something, I don't know. And your quads should stay in line with that. If your thighs are pushing past it, sweeping out past your hips, you know, that's your frame telling you something right there. It has nothing to do with your legs being too big or anything like that. It's really about your proportions. When your lower body is sweeping out wider than your hip line, it pulls your eyes naturally down. And you can see a perfect example right here. Like this naturally brings attention downwards. And by comparison, it makes the upper body, no matter how built it is, it's going to be naturally seen as narrower by comparison. And this is the perfect example. Just look, they're the same shape and size, right? But the only difference is the legs are way bigger here. And then that definitely draws your attention to it, right? If we're comparing golden era physiques, universally, the ones that are always talked about, they always pass this test. You can kind of see right here, for example. In comparison, the modern day, everything having mass and just being a mass monster. And you can see just side by side, right? What looks a little more aesthetic, because here it sticks out too much and it looks kind of goofy and it makes his midsection by comparison look very odd, I guess you can say, and not as impressive versus this. And they just look less proportional overall. All right, moving on. Number 3 is your shoulder to waist ratio. Your target isn't necessarily wide shoulders, it's a target ratio. It's your shoulder to width and waist width. A guy with narrow clavicles and a tighter waist can hit the exact same ratio as a guy with wider clavicles and an average waist. It's the same vtaper look. And let me just give you a comparison here. So you have a wider frame versus a narrow frame, but they both have the vtaper ratio, right? You understand? This guy is obviously way more impressive because of his frame. So this is my whole kind of architecture thesis. The frame is your starting point, right? But the ratio is what you're actually building. And that ratio is achievable for almost everyone, regardless of your body. So don't get super black pill and depressed about it. Instead, like let's say you're this guy. Instead of asking, how do I get shoulders like him? I want to be big and broad. You need to be asking, what's my shoulder to waist ratio right now? And how can I make that look better? And the answer, you already know, train your side delts, lats, blah, blah, blah. I won't be repeating that. You can go check out my vtaper playlist after and I'll break that down for you. Number 2, your torso to waist ratio. Two people can run the exact same program, eat the exact same, build the exact same amount of muscle, and they'll end up looking completely different. Muscle doesn't change your skeleton, okay? It just fills it out. If two skeletons are different shapes, the same amount of filling produces different shapes, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. If this guy has the same frame as this guy, the only difference is your body fat, right? And how much you fill out this lower midsection. The only difference is this guy is just leaner in his midsection because he's not filled out as much, and that builds that frame. For example, let's take a look at Shiro Emiya from Fate Stay Night versus the Hulk. Now, obviously, these are fictional characters, right? But here's the thing. This plays out in real life too, like we just saw with the last example of the narrow clavicle guy versus the wider frame guy. And it's the exact same thing here. These guys can train the same, eat the same, all that, but they're going to look completely different after the fact, right? And that's why comparing your progress photos to someone else is never going to work as a measurement, because you're not measuring against the same canvas. This little guy here should not be comparing his frame to this guy. It would be ridiculous for that to happen. If he is doing the same training as him and eating the same, they're going to look very, very different. Like, it's not even going to be close. What you need to be measuring against is your own canvas and your own frame, which brings us to this reveal. You need to stop comparing yourself to others. This is a great quote by Epicurus. Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not. Remember, what you now have was once among the things you only hoped for. You need to delete your dream body out of your head, okay? Delete that goal from your mind completely. Not because that goal was a bad goal, but because the goal was for the wrong person. Let's use this as an example. If you're a white guy and you say, I want dreads, I think I'll look good with dreads, it probably wouldn't look as good if you were a black guy and you grew your dreads out, right? Because it's not really for your phenotype and it's not really for you. And the exact same thing applies to your frames. Here's what you're going to do instead. I want you to take a current photo of yourself. This, swear to God, this is literally how I looked before I started working out. And that's going to be your actual starting frame. Wide lats, big shoulders, tight waist, all that. And that target is reachable because that other guy you're comparing yourself to was never yours to begin with. You were never intended to have that body. Now, if you want to learn how to do that, check out this video and the vtaper playlist.